This is the Book Deal Podcast,
where you will discover the inspiring stories of the authors behind your favourite books.
No matter what stage of writing you are at, we've got you covered. I'm Tina Strong.
And I'm Madeline Cleary, and join us as we pull back the curtain of published authors.
One deal at a time.
The Book Deal Podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters which it's recorded on, and pays respect to their elders past, present and emerging. Hi, it's Madeline here. With 11 novels to her name, international best-selling and Perth-based author Natasha Lester is a writer who needs no introduction. Her novels have been translated into 21 languages and are published all around the world. I finished Natasha's latest novel, The Mademoiselle Alliance, the night before our chat, and I struggled to contain my fangirling before we hit record. I love Natasha's messages to writers in this one, about writing your way to success by writing what you love, being brave to set crazy goals, setting time aside to work on the business behind being a writer, and of course, our chat about her latest novel, inspired by the incredible Marie-Madeleine Fourcade, the only woman to lead a resistance movement in World War II in France. Hi, Natasha Lester. Welcome to the Book Deal Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting today.
Oh, I'm just so excited to have you on. And I just wanted to reflect on, I'm not sure if you remember the first time we met in person, Natasha.
Remind me. I will remember. There are so many things in my brain. I keep saying to my publicist, I'm so worried that half of them are falling out somewhere.
Maybe I shouldn't remind you because it's a bit of an embarrassing story for me. So it was back you were on publicity tour for the disappearance of Astrid Ricard.
Okay. I signed a book for you, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
I remember it all coming back to me now. I knew it would.
And this book was actually one that I had not purchased, and I ran out of the store. No. So for listeners, what happened? Because this event was really popular. There were so many people and I hadn't had a chance to go and buy the book. And when they called up the signing line was huge. And I said to my mum, go grab a copy so I can quickly get in line. So I'm not going to be, waiting in line for hours. And mum's like, yep, no worries. I'm like, I'll stand in line. Mum, you go buy it. She's like, yep, got it. And so went and had a lovely chat with you, Natasha. You were so gracious and so lovely. And then Mum and I were walking out of the store and I said, oh, Mum, let me know how much to transfer you.
I signed a stolen book. I remember.
I was horrified. We just looked at each other outside and we're like, what do we do?
No, that was great. I've never signed a stolen book before. So it's like a highlight.
Not that you know of.
Yeah, not that I know of. True.
Also, I did go back and purchase the book.
Of course. Being an author, you would know.
Exactly. Now, you're about to launch upon your new book, which is coming out on the 26th of March in Australia. And you've got a bunch of international releases coming as well for the Mademoiselle Alliance, which I've just read, and it is brilliant.
Thank you so much.
And I'm so
excited to read so many books for this podcast, so thank you.
Oh, no, it was an easy one to read, and I just absolutely adored it, and we will talk about it. But I want to sort of go back to the start because we're all about talking about book deals on this podcast.
Yep.
You have so much experience to share. And when I was doing some research, I realised your first novel, or your first historical fiction novel, was published in 2016.
Yes, that's right.
That was only 9 years ago. You've released 9 historical fiction books in 9 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, it must be. I'm looking over at my shelf now and counting 2, 4, 6, 8. Yes, this will be is this number 9? Yeah, it is. It's number 9. Oh my gosh.
Which is
crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How have you, are you okay?
No, I do go through phases of intense brain fatigue, and every now and again, I mean, it sounds like I've had one a year, but I haven't had one every year. Like my last book was 18 months ago, and then I've had a couple of other 18-month stints in between. So I've had 18 months is a rest for me. But yes, I suspect that pace will slow down as the years progress and I get older and older.
Well, I hope not, because we love having them out in the world every year, even if there is an 18 months break in between.
But you didn't actually start in historical fiction. Your first two novels were contemporary. Can you maybe talk about how you got your deal for your very first book, which is What Is Left Over After?
Yes, so I had written that as part of a university master's program, and like all young, hopeful master's graduates, I'd sent it out into the big wide world. And like it was a long time ago. So that was published in 2010. So I was sending this out around 2007. And agents were still asking you back then to send it by post,
Oh my
not
gosh.
email. I know that's how old I am. That's the worst part of this story, right? So I had posted my chapters and query letters out to the like 3 or 4 agents that were accepting submissions in Australia at the time. It wasn't like now where they have open periods. It was very hard to just send an unsolicited submission to an agent. And they'd all rejected me quite nicely in many cases with lovely handwritten, not even typed.
Wow.
Yes, I know.
Have you kept them?
Yeah, I have. I've got a folder of them. Of course, I've kept them.
Scrapbook.
Yeah,
Could be worth money in future, Natasha.
that's right. And then I'd sent it off to a couple of publishers as well, who were again at that time open, which again wasn't many because they didn't, publishers these days have open slush piles that you can submit. That wasn't the case back then. And pretty much everyone had rejected me, which was only about, like 5 people in total. And so in Western Australia, we have the TAG Hungerford Award for fiction, and that's an award for any unpublished manuscript written by a West Australian author or someone with a strong connection to WA. I live in WA, and I'd known about that award forever, and that was always on my kind of goals list. So I submitted it to the Hungerford, crossed my fingers. It's about 9 months, the judging process, so you don't hear anything for a really long time.
Oh, that's a long.
It's probably changed. Again, this is like such a long time ago. I'm sure it must be quicker now. And then I got contacted and told I was on the shortlist with 2 other people. And I was super excited, but I was also quite despondent because a writing friend of mine, Julian Van Loon, had recently won the Australian Vogel Award when that existed. And she'd been called by the judges before the night of the awards ceremony to tell her that she'd won. So she had a speech ready. So, of course, me being me, I assumed this was how all literary award ceremonies worked. And no one had called me to tell me to get my speech ready for the TAG Hungerford Awards.
We haven't won, obviously.
So I went along on the night thinking, oh God, I haven't won. What am I going to do? This is like literally my last chance. I don't know. And my husband said later, he's driving me there and he was thinking the same thing. Oh my God, what are we going to do? She's not going to win because she hasn't got the phone call. She's going to be so sad. How am I going to cope with her afterwards? Anyway, so these 2 despondent people were driving along to this awards ceremony, and then we arrive and they pull out the envelope, and I'm looking around the room at the 2 other shortlistees, trying to scope out which one it's going to be. And then they read my name out, and I have literally never been more surprised in my life. So, so I won that, and that came with a publishing contract. Still, the award still exists. It still comes with a publishing contract. And it's such a great award because it's launched the careers of so many West Australian authors, like Holden Shepherd won that award for Invisible Voice, which is now obviously a Stan phenomenon. So it's just a really valuable part of the West Australian writing community.
When you did get shortlisted and when you ultimately won, what was that feeling like that first time? Because is that the first validation you got for your writing, or were there other things that you were submitting?
I know I had submitted some poems and short stories in the couple of years, probably more than the couple of years prior, probably the 5 years prior to that. In fact, I had this like beginner's luck. The very first thing that I ever sent off to anyone was a poem to Overland magazine, which I don't know if that does still exist. It was a very famous literary magazine. And I'd written it as part of a university assignment. My tutor had said it was great and I should try and submit it. Sent it off by post, again with a stamped self-addressed envelope. Oh my God, I'm so old. And my stamped self-addressed envelope arrived back in the mail, and I thought it was going to have the standard rejection letter in it, and it had a check for $100 and an acceptance letter saying it was going to be published. And so after that initial beginner's luck, obviously things did not always run that smoothly with every other submission that I had sent out after that, but I kept sending out poems and short stories. And so I'd had a few of those published, but it's not the same. I think when your ambition is to be a novelist, it's not until you know that your novel is going to be published that you feel like you can really call yourself a writer. Like we would go to parties and people would ask me what I did, and I would never have said, oh, I'm a writer. I would have said I'm studying writing or something like that. But then once I knew that book was going to be published, it was like, now I'm an author.
Isn't that strange, though, how we have this imposter syndrome about it?
Yeah.
Anyone that writes is a writer. It's quite interesting. So, 2007, so you win this award. At what point did you decide I want to be a writer? Maybe just to yourself, you might not have told other people about it.
Oh, no, when I was little, like my mum has all of these poems and little books that I wrote and illustrated when I was young. I always loved writing. I always loved reading, and I always wrote things throughout my whole childhood. And when I was reading a book and I had that, I fell into the story and had that strong sense of being taken away to some other time, place, person, inhabiting someone else's life, I would always think, wow, imagine being able to make people feel like this. Like that's like a superpower. To me, it was. And so from then on, I wanted to be a writer. It just took me, a long time to get there, but
and so you've always wanted to do it. Was there a point where you said, okay, I'm going to start doing it? And how do you start when you get that, when you decide, okay, this is what I want to do?
So for me, when I was in year 12 and everyone was selecting their university courses that they were going to do, I still wanted to be a writer then. But in WA, there wasn't really a creative writing course that existed at university back then. There was journalism, and I didn't really want to be a journalist, but that was the only thing similar. So I ended up doing a Bachelor of Commerce, and I majored in marketing and public relations because that had this kind of writing element to it, because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to be a writer. There was no kind of apprenticeship or pathway like there was if you wanted to be a teacher or a doctor. There was this very clear kind of pathway to follow and very clear set of objectives that you had to achieve along the way. So and back then there wasn't the wealth of information on the internet, because the internet didn't exist back then. When I was leaving high school, that was like this far-flung dream. Didn't even have mobile phones. Oh my God, I'm so old. So I know how to access the kind of information that might have helped me to be able to become a writer. But I also strongly believe that back then at age 17, I didn't have the emotional range that I needed to be able to be a writer. So it was actually a good thing that I went and did a completely different degree. Then I worked in marketing for 10 or 12 years. And then my husband had to follow me to Melbourne for my work. And then when he had to go back to Perth for his job, I obviously went with him. I didn't stay in Melbourne. And that meant quitting my marketing job that I had at L'Oreal. I was marketing manager for Maybelline.
It sounds so romantic.
It was really fun. And, coming to Perth where there weren't companies with their head offices located here back then. So there wasn't the same kind of marketing job available. And that was when I thought, well, I've still got this idea in the back of my mind about being a writer. Maybe rather than just getting any old marketing job, I go back to university, because now there are creative writing courses at university, and I give it a try, because it's all very well to think you want to be a writer, but the actual practice of being a writer, like maybe it would have been different to what I thought. Maybe I wouldn't have enjoyed it. So I wanted to check that first. And also, obviously, the most important thing is to find out if I was any good at it, because, my amateur childish kind of books were not very good. So I needed to kind of test myself. So I did go back to university, and I found out that I loved it, got my poem published. So that was like, okay, well, maybe I have some ability to do it. And I kept going from there. So that was really, I've completely forgotten what you actually asked me. Did I answer your question? Oh my God.
No, absolutely. I'm interested actually. a few writers now that have had marketing and public relations backgrounds.
Interesting.
Which is, yeah, really interesting. And I suppose it goes into that advertising marketing space where you are being a bit more creative, but in order to make money.
Yes. And also, I guess you're telling a story when you're going out
Yes.
there to consumers with a brand. You're saying to them, imagine yourself with this. And so you have to create a story around that. So I feel like, I can understand that.
Yes, and actually, authors are always told that we have to tell the story behind the story as well. That's been something that I'm learning how to do with my debut coming out. How's your marketing background helped you? Do you think has it helped you in your writing life? And what maybe tips do you have for emerging writers?
I definitely think it has helped me because it's hard. There are a number of schools of thought out there about whether writers should or shouldn't think about their readers and their audience. And, when you get into marketing and you drill down to things like target audiences, like it sounds icky when you put that into like a writing in a book kind of space. But I mean, mostly I would imagine that people are writing to be read. And so therefore you are at the end of the day trying to reach a customer. So having that ability to appreciate the art of what I'm doing, but understand that there's a business side of it as well, I think has actually been really helpful. And I don't feel embarrassed or ashamed about acknowledging there is a business side to this. And some writers don't want to think about that, and that's absolutely fine. Everyone is different and everybody should approach it the way that feels most comfortable to them. But I don't know whether I would have achieved the success that I have achieved if I hadn't have been able to consider at least the business aspects of being a writer as well. I mean, you are a CEO of your own business and you are required to invent the idea for the product, then create the product, market the product, manage your budgets, do all your finances, do strategy for yourself. Like, where do I want to be in 5 years' time? That's up to you to decide. So, and all of those kinds of things I had to do in marketing. It was all strategy, ideas, product creation, finance, budgeting, etc. So it's been really useful. And my big piece of advice to writers would be to just, spend some time thinking about whether or not, giving yourself a bit of a day every couple of months to think about the more business aspects of writing would be useful to you. And for some people, it'll be like, no, that will totally dampen my creativity and I won't be able to write. And if that's the case, then you shouldn't do that. But for other people, it might be worthwhile. And, giving yourself a business day that you formally kind of set aside in your calendar can be a really good thing because it forces you to acknowledge the other elements that there are to being a writer.
Oh, no, I think that's excellent advice. And I think you're an example of someone that's really built your brand really, really well. And I know we cringe as creatives to hear that, but it is true. When people say, I want to, it's a Natasha Lester book, they know, that they're going to get a really well-written, beautifully crafted, well-researched novel. Is that what you'd intended from the start? Because your two first books, you've first released your two books, which were contemporary fiction, and then you've since then published historical fiction with Hachette. Was that a deliberate decision, or was it just what you want to write?
It's funny how little intention has gone into a lot of the things that I've done, but you're absolutely right when you say that, we don't like to think of ourselves as brands, but that's how the publishers think of you. When someone is submitting, they want to know the comp titles. They want to know what 2 books or 3 books this is like, or will appeal to the readerships of. Those comp titles are really important out there for publishers. And that's really saying, I think my brand aligns with this author brand is really what you're saying when you're picking those comp titles on your pitch document. So, so it is important to think about that stuff. But sort of when I moved from contemporary fiction to historical fiction, it was a bit of an accident. I had written a 3rd contemporary that I thought I would get published, but it was a horrible writing experience. It was a terrible book. I threw it in the bin and sort of didn't know, it was a bit of a loose end, didn't know what to do. It was a bit of a crisis moment, I suppose, for me. I didn't have the difficult second book. I had the difficult third book. I'm obviously a bit
What
delayed.
made it difficult? Because I know a lot of people find this.
Yeah, for me it was, I think because I'd written my first book as part of a university master's program. Back then, I think it's very different now and it's much more open at the universities. There was a very strong expectation about the kind of book you would write as part of that master's program. And it needed to be serious and weighty and heavy and sad and grim almost. like it and so I wrote two books like that. And then I think I'd run out of that kind of energy by the third. It wasn't.
They sound very consuming.
Yeah, I could write like that, but it wasn't really me. I needed a bit more light, a little bit more love, a little bit more ability to shape the female characters in a less kind of vulnerably victimy kind of way, maybe.
You're finding beauty, I think, in your novels. You're finding this beauty, this during troubled times, because there's still a lot of darkness in your
Yes,
books.
absolutely.
But there's these moments of light and beauty, which is what I love about your writing. So I guess
thank you. Yeah, I mean that's I guess really what I'm trying to do, but I didn't know that then. I literally just pulled all my favorite books off my bookshelf and I reread them. And that was when I realized that so many of them were historical fiction. And I hadn't ever really thought to myself before, oh, I love historical fiction, but I clearly did love historical fiction. And then the smart part of my brain went, oh, why don't you try writing historical fiction then? And I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. So I did. So it wasn't intentional and it wasn't planned. And same thing when I began to write the dual narratives. After my third historical, that was again an accident. It wasn't intentional. And then that bit, and the whole French thing wasn't intentional.
Really? Because it all seems so strategic, Natasha, when you look at it in retrospect, perhaps.
I think it's all, I was pursuing my interest and doing what I loved. And that's also a really key thing, I think, for people. You've got to write about the things that you most love, because when you're doing that, the readers will feel the love. And then that was how the brand shaped out of me just writing about the kinds of things that I really enjoyed exploring in my novel. So no, it wasn't intentional. And so I think that definitely in writing there is that push and pull and balance between some of the stuff is just very magical and spontaneous and going with your gut. And then there is this kind of business element to things as well. And you've got to have both parts playing off against each other at the same time.
Would you, is historical fiction, is that where you're going to stay, do you think? Because there's a lot of talk about writers sticking, and I know publishers enjoy when writers stay in the genre. Have you ever had this discussion?
Yes, what's interesting, particularly in America at the moment, because obviously that's my biggest market, simply because more people in America, right? So if you're selling books there and hitting bestseller lists there, you're just naturally going to sell more copies. And similarly to here, historical fiction has been declining over the last year, a couple of years or so. You know, we had this golden run, which is a bit like what romantasy and crime are having now. Eventually they'll reach kind of their decline, their peak, and start to decline. It happens with every genre that kind of has this big burst. So in the US, there's been a lot of talk about pivoting, which is, I hate that word, but that's the word that everybody is using over there. And writers are being encouraged which I think is great, because it's not normal to take a bit of a turn and to keep some of the hallmarks of their brand, but to maybe explore a different direction. So I've got
romantasy in your future, Natasha?
No, romantasy is not in my future. It's in my daughter's future. She adores those books, which is great that she's reading them. So no, I've got a book coming out. Probably next year it'll be out, because I've submitted that. And that, while still having a historical element to it, has some quite different pivoty, I guess you would call them, elements to it as well. And that was super, super fun to write. I had a great time writing that book.
Okay, pivoting. Okay, I'm going to remember that. That's an interesting way of describing it. I want to talk about the US, actually. It's a bit of a dream, I think, for all emerging writers and debut writers to be published internationally. And particularly in the US market, like you said, it is your biggest market. Can you talk a little bit about your experience becoming a New York Times bestseller? And I believe it was perhaps Penny from Costco that might have assisted. Is that right?
Yeah, so thank God for Penny, I always say. So I had published 2 historical novels with Hachette Australia, which hadn't been published internationally at all. And then my 3rd historical was The Paris Seamstress, and that was picked up by a publisher in the US, and which I thought was fantastic. But I was also quite pessimistic about it because I just didn't see why people so far away would read a book written by an author from Australia.
But there's a lot of, it's very much set in New York though as well.
Yes, exactly. But I don't know whether I was just setting my expectations low or something. I don't know. So I was just happy that it was being published, but didn't expect it to do anything very much. And it was published in August of 2018, and it had a reasonably, like a better print run to kick off than I thought. And just kept getting reprinted, just little reprints, because people just sort of kept buying it. And so that was all gone quite well. Like, I was pretty happy with it as it was. And I still didn't have any more expectations for it until this email arrived in my inbox. It must have been late October, early November. So this is a couple of months after publication. And my editor in New York said to me, "Oh my God," and she used exclamation marks. And when a publisher uses exclamation marks, you know it's exciting because they hate exclamation marks, right? And she said, "The Paris Seamstress is a Penny's pick for December." And I'm like, who the fuck is Penny? I don't know. I've never heard of this woman. And I was like, okay, that's great. And she clearly got the sense from my reply that I was underwhelmed and not taking this information on in the way I should be. So she then came back to me with a full explanation of who Penny was. She was the main buyer for Costco. Costco's like your big box department store in the US. They're massive. They don't sell many books, but the ones they sell, they take a lot of stock of. And Penny would choose one book each month from all the books available, and it would be her pick. And people had come to trust her pick.
I love that.
I know. It was it was like the Reese Witherspoon
Yes,
book
I was just going to say.
big box department stores. Oh my God, it was.
She's an influencer. Penny was an early influencer.
She was, and she doesn't do it anymore, which is such a shame. I know. So she interviews the author, and you have a big article in the Costco magazine, which goes out to, millions of households all over America. And you walk into the store and there's Penny's pick right at the front of the store. And the cherry on the icing on the cake was that it was December's pick. So that's Christmas, right? So everyone's walking into Costco to get a Christmas gift, and there is the Paris Seamstress sitting right there saying, "I'm the perfect Christmas present." And they bought it, and they bought it, and they bought it, and they bought it, to the extent that my publisher ran out of exclamation marks every time she gave me a sales update, because it was just so astounding for both of us, the kind of numbers that we were moving. And then, like in February, so 6 months after publication, Target came on board as a new retailer. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, that was amazing. So then it had this whole another boost from that, which meant that by the time my next book came out, which was called The French Photographer here in Australia, The Paris Orphan in America, that came out in the September of 2019, that went straight to the New York Times bestseller list, which was another pinch me moment. And again, my editor emailed me with exclamation marks saying, "Oh my gosh, The Paris Orphan is on the New York Times bestseller list." And then she said, "You can cross that off your bucket list." And I was like, I don't have it on my bucket list because it seems so extraordinarily unlikely to happen. So yes, I did get out a piece of paper and write bucket list on top and write it on there just so I could cross it out.
Hello listeners, my name is Angie Cui. I'm a member of Debut Crew 2025. I'm so happy to share my first book with you. It's called My Mom is a Bird, which was released on the 1st of April through UQP. This touching story celebrates the differences and the beauty of loving your family, feathers and all. Its parents and carers stay at school. The child doesn't want to ask the mom to come to the school. This is all because the mom is a bird, an actual bird. Having a bird mom seems to stand out for all the wrong reasons, especially in the human world. After feeling embarrassed to bring the bird mom along, the child slowly realized that even though the mom is a bird, she's pretty cool after all. The story is inspired by one of my friends' daily life. The book reminds us families can come in all shapes and sizes. My Mom is a Bird is out now, available in bookstores. I cannot wait for you to meet my characters and experience this heartwarming story. Thank you so much to the Book Deal podcast for allowing me to pop in this episode. And thank you all for listening, and happy reading!
What does it mean to authors to be on the New York Times bestseller list?
Exciting, because it's still one thing. I don't know how much longer it will be meaningful for in the current kind of very fragmented media environment, but it still is meaningful to people. It's meaningful to bookstores, it's meaningful to readers. So it kind of just gives you a little bit more authority, I guess. And also, in Australia, there's not that many writers that have made the list, so it's kind of, it's such an honor. Do you know what I mean? Like it really feels like an honor.
And we don't really have an Australian equivalent unless we say an Australian bestseller.
No,
perhaps.
we don't really have an Australian equivalent at all. So
we need to start that, because in the UK there's the Times bestseller.
Exactly. Yeah. All
The
these.
Australian bestseller, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe we can like that. Okay, I want to talk about the Mademoiselle Alliance, which I'm very much hopeful will be on the New York Times bestseller list. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
Goals, 2025 goals.
Yeah.
But before we do, can you tell me about the first time you heard about Marie-Madeleine Fourcade?
So I had come across her name maybe just twice in non-fiction books that I had read about the Second World War over the years, because I've read quite a few for research for my other books, and she'd been mentioned in passing in connection to the resistance, and certainly never to me, to my knowledge, mentioned as the leader, the only female leader of the largest resistance network in France. Like that piece of vital information was missing from the books that I had read. And
I wonder why as well.
Yeah, I know. So I didn't know that she was that important, nor what she had done, until I sat down and decided to buy her memoir on a bit of a whim, really, of looking for a next book idea, and read her memoir and thought, oh my gosh, this is who I'm writing about. I can't think about anybody else.
So do you want to tell me a bit about her life then? And what was what really inspired you? When were you like, oh, this is a book, I have to write this story?
There were so many moments where I thought that. It's like almost impossible to pick one. So she grew up in Shanghai. Her father worked on the French merchant marine service. And so she grew up in the French concession of Shanghai, because obviously back then, there was a French concession there. So she had this very extraordinary childhood, being allowed to kind of roam free through Shanghai with her nanny and her brother and sister. And I think that childhood really formed the kind of woman she became. But at the same time, she was also practicing to be a concert pianist. So she was going to sit on the stage at the Palais Garnier in Paris and play the piano, right?
Of course she was. Nothing surprises me now about this woman.
I know. So 8 hours a day she's playing the piano, and then her father sadly passed away and the family had to move back to Paris. And a short time later, when she was 17 years old, she fell instantly in love with this French military intelligence officer. And part of the attraction maybe was that he was about to be posted to Morocco, because Morocco was a French colony at the time. This is the late 1920s. And so marrying him would mean moving to Morocco and having probably a similar experience to what she had in Shanghai. So she did that and, learned Arabic. Like, can you imagine a woman in the 1920s, Morocco, learning Arabic? Like
a blonde woman,
I know, like it's crazy, right? And she would go out with her husband to meet the tribal leaders that he had to talk to get information from for his role. She helped women at a local women's clinic give birth to their babies. Then she separated from her husband. They were very different in personality. She was quite vivacious and outgoing, and he was not like that. So she took her 2 children back to France with her.
And at the time, that would have been quite significant too.
Yes, she it's scarlet letter kind of stuff, being separated. The only way she could get away with it was because her husband was in Morocco. You could say that you had come back for the children's schooling. So people accepted that as an excuse because the schools in France were perceived to be better than those in Morocco.
Right.
So then she became a car rally driver. Like she drove in the very early car rallies, and did really well on them, came third and stuff like that.
There's a great scene of that in the book, which I just loved.
How can you leave that kind of stuff out, right? I know.
Even if it wasn't plot related, loved it.
I know, you just have to get that in there. She flew, she was a pilot, in the 90s. Are you kidding me? What did this woman not do, right? So she also worked as a journalist for a radio station, and she interviewed women who were kind of progressive for the time in France, so women kind of like her. And then, of course, war happened. In 1939, war was declared, and she'd, in the couple of years prior to that, had started helping a man called Navarre, who was publishing a newspaper designed to show the French people and the French government that Hitler was preparing for war, because people didn't believe that Hitler wanted to take over Europe. I don't know why they didn't believe that, but they didn't. And
they almost probably didn't want to believe it, did they?
And which is eerily similar to today, but that's a conversation for another time. So he was getting informants to smuggle papers out of Germany, which Marie-Madeleine would collect from places like Belgium, and then they would publish the plans of the Nazi Party in terms of their military strategy. And even that kind of information didn't convince people. So then the war happens, everything they've been publishing proves to be true and accurate, and France is taken over by the Germans and cut in half. And Navarre forms this intelligence network, which becomes a resistance network. That becomes the terminology for it. And he has Marie-Madeleine as his right-hand woman. She's his chief of staff initially until he is arrested. And
I love how quickly he just gets arrested, and Marie-Madeleine's like, okay, so I guess I'm going to take over then.
I know, isn't it? And the extraordinary thing was that she had no military training.
Yes.
She didn't have any formal intelligence training. She was 31 years old, a mother of 2 kids. In this network at this time were military men, decades her senior, with military experience that she didn't have. But there was something about her that made those agents and those men who, probably had some pretty chauvinist outlooks all the time. At that time, that was the kind of norm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet they accepted her as their leader. So that was number one, one of the extraordinary things that happened. And then so from then on, she led up to 3,000 agents in this resistance network that stretched across the whole of France and gathered so much important intelligence without which the war could have ended very differently.
That's right. Well, I mean, it sounds to me that without the intelligence of Alliance, thousands of more people would have died. The war would have kept going. The intelligence was crucial to the Allied invasion of France, the eventual Allied invasion in 1944. And this is a direct result. So why have we not heard about her before?
Well, most likely because she's a woman, sadly. But also I think it was because Charles de Gaulle, as you would say in French, but let's just call him Charles de Gaulle because that's easier. He created this group called the Compagnons de la Libération. And this was an honor he bestowed on the people he deemed most fundamental to securing France's freedom throughout the war. And he gave that honor to 1,038 people. 1,032 of them were men. So only 6 of them were women. And none of those women were Marie-Madeleine Fourcade.
It blows my mind. When I read that in the book, I was like, what? Is this real?
3 of her subordinates received the award. So 3 people who she was managing and giving priorities to for their intelligence gathering and managing them, telling them what to do, etc., they were awarded.
Did Charles de Gaulle just not like Marie-Madeleine?
Look, I feel like he probably was quite typical for a man of his time, given that he did only give the award to 6 women. There were many more than 6 women who were vital to the French resistance. So that in and of itself reflects perhaps his beliefs. There was also quite some tension between Charles de Gaulle and Navarre, who founded the Alliance Network. They were not friends, and so potentially it arose from that as well. But I think that when you've got a woman who is excluded from that list, then history thinks, well, she wasn't important. And then when the histories are being written, she doesn't get mentioned because she's not one of the most crucial people who helped to achieve France's freedom. So I think it probably happened from there, is my supposition anyway.
Well, I'm so glad that you have written this book because her story needs to be spread to a wider audience. And I consider myself a well-educated person. The fact that I hadn't heard of her was really disappointing to me. So have you approached the research to this story differently, do you think, than your other historical fiction books?
Really, other than I've had to read lots of French documents in the past for my books, but this time almost everything was in French. And
yes, I was very impressed when you said that you read her French memoir.
Yeah,
because the English it was an abridged version.
That's right. It left a lot of crucial stuff out. So I did it pretty much exactly the same way. I went to France, traveled in her footsteps, visited all of the locations where she had her headquarters, visited her grave, visited other memorials, particularly to a man named Léon Faye, who was her second in command. And I've read lots of documents in French, including Léon's niece had written this kind of handwritten journal about her uncle, which was... her handwriting was terrible, and she'd scratched out lines everywhere and put arrows adding in bits of information, and I had to decipher the handwriting and the French to be able to kind of create him as a character in the book. So it was the most difficult research, I would say, just from the language perspective. Whilst I do speak French, reading archaic French handwriting is very challenging.
Okay, well, I want to talk about then, because I read this in your newsletter, I think at the start of this year. I thought it was really inspiring. You said that you wanted to make optimism your 2025 word and your goal. So I want to talk about that because this year, it is a bit of an uncertain year and in lots of different ways, which we alluded to earlier. So what are your goals for the Mademoiselle Alliance, Natasha?
Well, my main goal is that I'd like as many people as possible to read it, because then they will know Marie-Madeleine Fourcade's name. And also, I've said that at its peak, the network was 3,000 people. 439 of those people died. And I bet nobody could name a single one of those people who died. And yet, if it wasn't for those people, the world could be a very different place. So just for them not to have died for nothing, because that's honestly, when you're doing this kind of research, that's kind of what it feels like, that nobody remembers them at all, and we really should remember them. So, standing by her grave and standing by Leon's memorial and other memorials, it felt a little bit futile, but then you remember, Adolf Hitler died and the Nazis did not exist anymore because of those people. And so the repercussions of what they did, we're still able to enjoy, and hopefully we'll continue to be able to enjoy. But at this crucial moment in time, I feel like her story is more pertinent than ever. So my optimistic goal is that everybody reads it and realizes that how much one person can do, because she, like I said, she didn't have military training or intelligence training. She was just an ordinary person like you and I, and yet she was able to lead 3,000 people to help France free itself of the Nazis. So we can all be Marie-Madeleine Fourcade if we, believe that we can, and we have a little bit of bravery and a bit of courage when we need to. It's amazing how much difference one person can make. So that's my optimistic goal, is that people read it and walk away feeling like that, and then go and do something to, help change the world.
I love that. That's a great, great goal to have. Okay, well, I think that's going to inspire a lot of people. And I hope everybody buys this copy, because I'm hoping that this book will absolutely fly this year in Australia and all your markets. I read that your books have been translated into 21 different languages, which is just incredible.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. I've got two last questions. One, I wanted to continue on the goal theme. what do you think we as sort of early emerging writers, debut writers, how should we define our goals? Like what should we aim for, do you think? We obviously are not probably aiming to be a New York Times bestseller, but what's some of the things that we should do? What's a realistic goal for us?
Why not aim to be a New York Times bestseller? Like, honestly, like if I didn't ever have those things on my list because I didn't ever think it was possible. But the thing I always try and say to new writers now is if it can happen to me, like it can happen to anybody. So you should never underestimate yourself. And I think as writers, so often we don't have the confidence to call ourselves writers. We don't have the confidence to believe that we can be a bestseller. We're almost apologetic to our publishers who need our books to be able to have books in bookstores. So, that would be what I would say, to have to have whatever crazy out there goals you want to, because they are all absolutely achievable. And why not walk through the world thinking, God, I'd love to be a New York Times bestseller, than thinking, oh gosh, I'm really lucky to get published and, I'll just, go and look at my book in a bookshop. And that's all great too, but why not have a bigger goal if you want to? That is, obviously you don't have to, but if you do,
love that.
knock yourself out.
Okay, so everybody has to write on their bucket list.
Yes, they do.
New York Times bestseller.
Yep.
Put it up there, put it on the fridge, put it on the back of the toilet door, wherever you want. There's no shame in having those goals.
At all.
Okay, so we always ask at the end of our podcasts, you've already shared with us so many of these, but we ask for your single top tip for emerging writers. What would you like to leave us with, Natasha Lester?
I feel like probably everybody might say this, but I feel it's even more important now is to read. I really feel like, I recently judged the TAG Hungerford Award a couple of years ago, and I could tell who read books and who did not read books. That's 97 manuscripts that I read in full over that time. And because the market is a bit tricky at the moment and things are going to keep changing and they're going to keep evolving at a more rapid pace than they have been over the last kind of 10 years, you need to read more and more and more. Read things you don't like, read things you do like, read things you think are bad, read things you think are good. Try not to have those judgments about books. If they're being published by a publisher, then the publisher thinks there's something about them that will engage readers. So what is it about those things that will engage readers? And read critically, look at, why does this book work for me or why does it not work for me? Because in understanding what you don't like to read, you learn more about your own voice as a writer and your own personal interests. And you have to bring what's particular to you to your own writing. And if you don't know what that is, then you can't bring it to your writing. So reading helps you to develop that sense. It's a subconscious gut thing. You couldn't probably sit down and notate it out, but the reading helps with all of those things.
Great advice, I think. And why not go and enjoy reading as well? We are all, if we're writing, we generally like to be readers as well. So go out and enjoy and read different things. And I hope everybody reads the Mademoiselle Alliance, which will be coming out on the 26th of March. Thank you so much, Natasha Lester, for joining us on the Book Deal podcast.
Thank you. It was so much fun chatting to you.
Thank you for listening to the Book Deal podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the pod so you can receive updates as soon as our new eps drop. And to keep up to date with what the pod is doing, you can also find us on Instagram.